Well, hi everyone. This is part 4 of our 5-part series on music libraries. Welcome to Gig. I'm your host, Mike Redman. Before we get started, please take a moment and hit that subscribe button so that I can continue to bring you information that will help you in your music career. Today, my guest is Edwina Travis-Chin. She's the head of strategy for APM, Associated Production Music, one of the most successful libraries that exist today. Every company needs a strategy. Every company needs a plan, even music libraries. Edwina talks about why producers should be licensing their music, along with many other subjects. I know you're going to enjoy this one. Edwina has more experience than most people in the music library business. So as always, let's jump right in. Well, good morning, Edwina. How are you?
I am fine. Thank you, Michael.
And LA is good, I hear.
LA is good. It's sunny outside. We're not quite in the heavy heat wave that we were in last week, so it's still warm but bearable.
I'm up in North Carolina in the mountains. It's where we spend our summers, and it's probably going to be 73 today, so it's just awful.
You're talking about our nighttime temperatures.
Yeah, I know. But I also live in Florida, where it's my other place. It's 105. So, so I get it. So I'm up here as much as I can. So, Edwina, as I mentioned in the intro, you work for Associated Production Music. What is it that you love about music? You've been doing it a long time.
You know, the thing I think that I love about music in general is that it doesn't rely on language to communicate. It can reach all people on all different levels, and that every person interprets music differently. So it really, when you hear a piece of music, it belongs to you. Your experience of it belongs to you and not really to anyone else. You may have some things that are shared in common in terms of how you react to that music. Yeah. And certainly in my business, that's what we're trying to put our finger on, is how can we get everyone to kind of react to music in the same way. But ultimately, my reaction to a piece of music is going to be distinct from anyone else's.
That's really interesting. I've never thought of music that way, and I've been doing it my whole life. So what were some of the determining factors for you to take a job at APM over a career as an artist, a music artist?
Honestly, I never wanted to be an artist. I grew up trained as a classical pianist. That's my background. But knew that, number one, I didn't have the talent. Number two, I didn't have the discipline. And number three, I was really awful at scale. So I could never really, aspire to be a concert pianist or anything. I loved being an accompanist. That was the thing I actually really liked to do. I liked the idea of working in an ensemble situation. I was actually a school teacher for a number of years. Okay. And morphed from that into doing music rights and clearance. Fell into that. So I got a pretty solid background in terms of how the music business itself works. And I was actually a client of APM's when someone had decided that they were going to leave, and Phil Spieler, who was at the time the head of APM, said, knew about me and said, he was intrigued with the idea of having somebody who had the music business background coming to work for the company, and asked if I'd be interested in coming in for an interview. And as they say, the rest is history.
Wow. That's nice.
I think that the great thing is that this job allows me to take all of the different music experiences that I had, working with students, which is kind of like working with music supervisors in some ways. Doing that, my formal music background, the clearance side of things, and this job has really been sort of the perfect amalgamation of all those experiences, and has allowed me to, dabble in all those areas at various points.
What are your responsibilities? I mean, you're the vice president of strategy and content. First of all, what is that, and what do you do in that role?
It means that I work very closely with Adam Taylor, who's the president of APM, to make sure that we're getting the kind of music in that we need for our clients, to work with our libraries in conjunction with the rest of our music team to say, here's what we're hearing that our clients want. We give feedback to the libraries telling them, can you please make more of this, less of that? ways that you can improve what you've currently been producing, and also just to make sure that we're responding appropriately on a long-term basis as well as a short-term basis to what we know our clients are going to be looking for their productions.
That's interesting. It's kind of like, in a way, you're just that part of it is you're a liaison between the client and the creator.
Yeah, I kind of get to take the umbrella view of everything. I still have a handful of clients that I actually do, work with in terms of doing music searches and all that sort of thing. But my job right now is really to have that 10,000-foot view of everything and move the pieces around in the appropriate manner.
So let's just jump in the music library business for a few minutes.
Okay.
You call yourself a glorified librarian. But you're viewed largely by many people in the industry as the resident expert of all things music library, partially because you've been doing it so much, but you've had so many different experiences. So one of the big questions that I wanted to ask you is, what should media producers, film producers, editors, people that use music, know about music licensing? The good, bad, the ugly of what happens when you don't license your music, why you really need to, that kind of thing.
I would say that the most important thing for producers, media producers, to know with regard to music licensing is you need to do it. I used to do presentations to the American Film Institute to their students who are obviously doing projects, and one of the first things I said to them, would always tell them, is that, in the same way that you want people to respect the product that you're creating, you need to respect the music that you're putting into your productions. You've got a vested interest in your intellectual property. We have the same with regard to the intellectual property that is our music. So, there are obviously a lot of those myths. Oh, you can use 5 notes without having to pay for it, blah, blah, blah. The whole issue of public domain, which I don't want to get into because it's so horribly complicated, but just because Aunt Sally sang it or knew it as a kid does not mean it's public domain. I mean, there's a lot of responsibility that goes into incorporating an existing piece of intellectual property into your project, and you need to do your due diligence.
Right. That's where your music directors come into play, right? Helping somebody that doesn't really know that much about it. Many times, I'm sure that you're not working with music supervisors. You're working, on a project. You are working with Mike Redman, who's going to do this film, and he heard he should call you guys, and you're kind of educating me along the way, right?
Yes. I think part of the responsibility of a music director is not only to help our clients, whether they be really experienced music supervisors or if there's somebody who's, really the PA who's, they were told, hey, go find us a piece of music.
Right.
Is to, number one, respond to what it is they're actually asking for. One of the big challenges, and actually the challenge that I really like, is getting inside the head of the person who's asking you for music. So that's the creative part of it. But the legal responsibility part of it is not to provide them anything that is going to jeopardize their project.
Right.
So you mentioned, that the music directors help with that. We help with that by explaining to somebody, the piece that you're asking for is still under copyright. And if we were to help you with that, we would only be able to possibly provide a sound recording that we could license to you, but the publishing is still controlled by someone else, and you're going to need to get a separate clearance for that.
Right.
So we can help people understand the difference between what a library is able to provide and what their responsibilities are if they decide to use a piece of commercial music in their project.
Do you have a story about a music licensing project that you saw that went sideways? Sorry.
One that Adam would allow me to talk about?
Yeah, sure.
guess what I would
You don't
point
need
out,
to mention the name, just,
no, I won't mention it.
A project, yeah.
I will. This is sort of by way of explaining why it's important to understand that you need to license your music, and it's not so much something that we did that went sideways, as an example of how when you don't pay attention to everything, things can go sideways on you. And this happened many years ago, so no, I don't think anybody can fault me on bringing this up. But I happened to be traveling and was in an airport, and they always have TV monitors on and the local whatever program going on. Sure. And this was one of the local stations airing one of their local interest, broadcasts. And I went, I recognize that music. And I know who produces those shows. And I don't remember that we have a license for that. I don't, because we were a much smaller company back then. I had my hand on knowing what everything was that was going on. Came back, and as it turns out, no, they had licensed a bunch of other things from us for other shows, but had neglected to license this particular show. And they had to pay some penalties on top of what the regular license fees would have been. So again, somebody who knew better. But just, got careless or had assumed that somebody else had taken care of it and hadn't dotted their I's and crossed their T's.
Or they thought that it was so local nobody would ever hear it. So,
there are so many audio detection systems now that trying to get away with anything, it's like, you really want to play that musical version of Russian roulette? I don't think so.
I don't think so either. Before we go on, I want to kind of make it clear that you don't, as a company, APM doesn't accept single submissions. Like, I can't just send you music and say, hey, would you put this in your library? Because you represent many, many libraries globally.
Right.
So at best, you can probably send me to somebody to listen to my music. But let's talk for a minute about how it works for APM with your relationships with libraries. Are they typically exclusive?
The deal with APM working with libraries is that we have the exclusive right to represent their catalogs for the U.S. and Canada.
Gotcha.
And those are the only territories and that's for synchronization that happens in those two territories. And they're free to have anybody else they want to represent them outside of our territories.
That makes sense. That's nice and clean. Are you the person in your role, since you're the VP of content, that kind of, if Mike Redman's library powerhouse, which we still, actually it's active somewhere, we come to you and would like you to represent us, or we think that maybe our library is good enough, but we're small, and we submit that to you. Are you the person that kind of ultimately decides this is a library that I think works for us?
Yes, in a certain sense, but I'm not the only person who's evaluating that music frequently. We have a whole music team of other music directors. We have some salespeople actually who specialize and focus on certain markets, and so frequently, definitely other music directors will weigh in terms of what they think of the quality of the music, how usable they think it's going to be based on the kinds of requests that they get, the experience that they have working with clients. And depending on the type of library, we'll also ask certain of our sales staff, because they're working with their clients, they know what their clients are asking for as well, to say, is this something you're getting requests for? And we've got a lot of very music savvy people on our sales side as well. So there are a lot of different people who have input into the final decision. But I guess I'm the one who gives the thumbs up or thumbs down.
Well, that's good, though. That's cool. That's so I know if I make it my newest library that I'm never going to make, I'll contact you. So that's interesting. So since you have a music business background, are you also the person that kind of does the contracts and deals with these libraries?
I actually don't deal with the contracts as much. I mean, we have a standard contract for any standard library agreement that we do. We have an in-house person who handles in-house counsel who deals with that. If someone doesn't agree with the points of our standard contract, then they're dealing with either our in-house counsel or with Adam Taylor, President Company.
Gotcha.
And they're the ones who iron out those details. My main responsibility when it comes to the contract is working with the library to say, how much content do we really want from you, either minimum amounts or maximum, in some cases, maximum amounts. I don't want somebody unloading 500 albums on us all in one fell swoop, which has happened sometimes. Sure. And just to figure out what is going to be a reasonable release schedule. And I just want to insert this. The reason that's important is that, APM is in the business not of just saying, we've got all this music and we want people to use it all.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We are in the business of wanting people to use our music, but we realize the reverse responsibility of that is to make sure that we're giving each of our libraries a fair shot at getting placement.
Right.
And that means balancing out. And when you talk about the strategy part, this is the other part of it, is balancing out what are we offering? What's the right mix between certain genres, certain types of markets, things that are going to be specialty, things that are going to be so general in usage that they're evergreens, as we say. So that all factors into what libraries we take on.
That's fascinating.
When and if we decide to take on new libraries.
Yeah. So that also, I guess, comes down to your music directors and your sales teams, because those are the people that are actually putting playlists together, or whatever you want to call them today, to send to the potential client for a specific need, right? And I understand now, I understand that they play a big role in the process, because you might have a lot of music that you've taken in, but they don't really like it that much, so they very rarely kind of put it out there. And then, of course, the library's like, well, why aren't you doing anything for me? So that's a good way to do that. I guess this is the deals that you make with libraries. It's not like a book publisher where there is upfront money. Is that correct?
No, there's not.
Okay. What should a library that would like APM to register them, to represent them, know before approaching you?
I would say, number one, know what your library's strengths are. If I've got the Michael Redman library, what is it that the Michael Redman, what's the elevator pitch for the Michael Redman library? And please do not tell me that we've got everything. in this day and age, unfortunately, there are so many libraries and so many existing large libraries that, frankly speaking, if you come to me and say, I've got everything, my gut reaction is going to be, well, I already have everything. We've got a library of hundreds of thousands of tracks. But if you come to me and say, I've got something that's very unique that I know that you don't have, because I've already done my research and gone on to your website to see what you currently have.
Right.
And I can bring you something that I feel you either don't already have, or something that I feel is better than what you currently have.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Let's say I have a certain style of music. Let's say I have big band jazz, which we have tons of big band jazz. So if you come to me with a big band jazz library, I'm going to say, we have an awful lot of that already. But if you come to me with something that is very unique about how your big band jazz has been done, I'm at least going to be more interested and figure out, is this something that I should consider? It's not a guarantee, but at least that's something that, when I'm in the unfortunate position of having to write rejection letters, that's one of the things that I point out, is that, it has to be something that we don't already have, something that is unique, or is something that is of a genre that gets used so much that we just chew through it at
there's a lot of need for it. something I think would be really useful to my listeners, and I think you're probably the perfect person to talk about. Would you explain what E&O insurance is?
Errors and omissions. I'm going to give you a very general sort of.
Yeah, sure. Just give me the kind of.
It basically means that you as the library have done your due diligence to make sure that the music that you are representing is free of any third-party claims against it. In other words, that you have 100% the right to license this. Nobody else has a claim on it. You've done all your homework. And so that if, for some strange reason, somebody comes out of the woodwork and says, hey, that you actually used my piece of music, you've infringed on my copyright, that the E&O insurance is a way of helping to cover any of the financial costs that you might be saddled with, both in terms of legal costs and, God forbid, the judgment goes against you and you are found liable. It's a way of covering whatever those financial judgments and costs might be, because you are verifying that, we did everything that we thought we needed to do. If something slipped by, it was not intentional.
Gotcha. That's a nice, clean explanation. Thank you. Just to follow up on that, if I'm a library coming to you, should I already have insurance myself, or is that something that's going to be covered under your blanket?
The way that I'll answer this, because this is my understanding of how it works from APM's point of view, and Adam may correct me on this, but if somebody comes to APM and says, hey, there's a problem with this track, APM is going to go to the library that we got the music from. The library is going to go to their composer. If there's a judgment and it was not APM's error, it's going to go back to the library. And the library, whether they have E&O insurance or not, I'm sure is going to be leaning heavily on the composer.
Right.
So in the sense that if somebody brought the suit against APM specifically, ultimately everything trickles downhill.
It's going to go back to the source.
It's going to go back to the source. So you as a library, depending on what kind of library you are. Now, if you're a library where everything in my library is something that I've written, you yourself and I are the person who's going to be responsible for anything that goes sideways. If you are the small library and you've got a bunch of, you've got your stable of composers, I would say that this would be the incentive to either, because insurance can be expensive, to say, all right, I'm going to budget for this insurance, or I'm going to make really, really sure that all of the composers and artists that I work with are aware of what their responsibilities are, what the rules are, and everything is locked down tight before I pass this music on to somebody like APM.
Edwina, what are the biggest challenges you think facing music libraries today?
There's an awful lot of competition. It's very hard to distinguish yourself from another library. There's the obvious challenge of AI.
No, we're going to talk about that in a second.
Which I know we're going to talk about. There's a general, I think one of the challenges is that there's a general devaluation in terms of music, the value of music. And this has been going on for a long time.
It sure has.
It's not new. I would say that in a lot of ways, the start of the TV magazine shows and the non-scripted kinds of productions encouraged music that didn't really need to set a scene the way that a score to a scripted program does. It was literally just background stuff to be able to keep the energy of the scene going. I mean, there was a reason that people were calling it wallpaper music back then.
Yeah, or music candy.
It was really just to keep the pulse going.
Sure. And I get it. Yeah, it makes sense though.
And I think once once there was a huge, the need for that started to get bigger and bigger, people are saying, well, why should I be spending all this amount of money for music or for composers or whatever, when it's not, all it's doing is filling space.
Let's go ahead and you mentioned it, so I'll just ask the question. What do you think the short and long-term influence of AI is going to be on music libraries?
Well, it's funny because I actually came across an old newspaper article literally yesterday.
Oh, wow.
That was from an LA Times article in 1988 about a guy on the East Coast who was writing these computer programs to write jingles.
Oh, wow. Okay.
This is back in 1988.
Oh, my God.
And I remember when that article came out, I thought, ugh. And I heard a couple of things, and they were really pretty awful. Yes, they were quote unquote music, and that they had harmony and melody and all that kind of stuff, but they weren't anything that was particularly appealing or creative sounding. And I think that anybody who was aware of that back then thought, well, this isn't going to go anywhere. Now, of course, the programs are much more sophisticated. And again, depending on what kind of music and what type of application you're talking about, can, on a certain level, be indistinguishable.
Yes.
From something that's been written by a human. My feeling is that at some point in time, there's going to be a break where people are like, you know what? We want something that really has a soul. And sounds, I'm not even going to necessarily call them music, although they have musical elements to them, but the sounds that are created totally by a computer-generated program, I don't believe will ever have the same level of soul and intrinsic emotion and creativity that comes out of a human composing a piece. And I think the fact that and you can correct me if I'm incorrect on this, but my understanding of current copyright law is that it only acknowledges copyright for things that are created by a human being.
Film and TV, the shows that are that do well, they have music budgets, and music is such a small part of the budget in post and everything that they probably don't really care to mess with it because it's not big enough. So my feeling is most of that music for a long, long time is not going to be affected. I think that you might see it really affecting where you said these shows that use music candy in the background, right? Doesn't really matter what it is, or the ones that are really low budget productions that are just getting non-exclusive, stuff off of other sites for $25 or a subscription, which doesn't matter if it's AI generated or if it's generated by whoever, whatever. Do you think that's a fair statement?
I think it probably is. I think that's already what's happening in a lot of cases. Certainly with the what I would call user-generated content.
Yeah, sure.
People who are creating YouTube videos and, people make a pretty good living off of that. I think that it's the whole idea of, are you wanting music to really enhance and contribute to the emotional content of what you're presenting? Or is it really just meant to be, something in the background to help fill space?
Yeah.
And I think at the point where we make a really clear distinction about what the function of the music is going to be, is ultimately going to determine the success of AI. Now, AI is going to get more and more sophisticated. And, I think that there are certain aspects of AI as a tool, not as the be-all and end-all, that are very useful. It's great that you can have AI determine what key you're in and what tempo something is playing. But those are very objective things. And I think that music, by the very fact that it's subjective, means that there's not a single formula that you can plug in that's going to give you it will give you a result. It will give you a result that is reasonable
Yes.
But is it really going to give you the result that you're looking for?
Edwina, how do you balance, because I know you have a very busy job, all this strategy with your gardening?
Well, the garden, I will confess that I know you got the gardening part off of my
Your bio,
online
yes.
bio, because I do enjoy gardening. But given that I live in Southern California, where we've been under drought conditions for many years,
oh my gosh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
the garden often doesn't get the kind of attention that it should get.
Yeah.
So for me these days, balancing work and gardening means being able to go out early in the morning, kind of look at the plants, spend Sundays watering the heck out of them, and, not putting the pressure upon myself to have this perfect garden. Garden is really just a place for me to chill out,
Yep.
see what's blooming, see what's got bugs on it, see what doesn't have bugs on it, and, just relax.
Several years ago, you gave some great advice about becoming a music supervisor in a video that I saw.
Oh.
And it had to do with, becoming an apprentice and, working with another music super stuff. If that rings a bell, could you talk about that again? I thought it was just a great conversation.
I'll try to remember what I said, but basically, apprenticing to somebody or interning with someone who is a music supervisor gives you a realistic idea of what that job really entails. I think that there's a lot of glamour, rightly or wrongly, associated with being a music supervisor. For a long time, it was a job that sort of was under the radar. It's very much more a high-profile job nowadays. Sure. The fact that colleges actually offer degrees in music supervision is just mind-boggling to me.
It blows my mind too.
So I would say that, if you have the opportunity to basically shadow somebody who's established and who has a good reputation, that you will learn a lot in terms of, how they work, how they deal with other people, how they respond to pressure, and also just really finding out, is this what you really want to do? Because I think that it used to be, I'm sure that this is not the case anymore, because there are actually, as I said, degree programs that teach you how to do this. But I think in the past, people used to go into it thinking, wow, I get to just listen to cool music all the time and do my playlists. Yeah. And it's so much more than that. The various responsibilities that you have when you are an A-list music supervisor entails much more than just listening to music.
Yes.
Also, learning how to take the ego out of it, because you may love this piece, a particular piece of music. If it's not the right piece of music for the scene that you've been asked to help, come up with suggestions for, it doesn't matter whether it's your favorite piece. That's not what the director's looking for. The responsibility of a good music supervisor is to be, same way as with a music director, is to get inside the head of the person who's making the creative decisions.
Right.
I heard I'm trying to remember, David Putnam, I believe, was the gentleman who directed Chariots of Fire. I heard him speak, excuse me, years ago, where he said his job as a director was to make sure that everyone was making the same movie.
Wow, what a great
And I have
line.
never forgotten that. And I thought, you know what? That's what my job as a music director / a music supervisor, whatever my title might be in my role as the music person. Yeah. It's to make sure I'm making the same movie as the director, because they're the person in charge.
That's great. Thank you. That's wow. I'm going to write that one down. It's going to go on my wall. Okay, just a little rapid fire before we go.
Okay.
So Just whatever comes to mind. There is no right, wrong. Your favorite movie of all time?
Singing in the Rain.
Toughest part of your job?
Not having enough hours in the day.
You kind of already answered this, but I'm going to throw it in there again. The model of your Alfa.
A 73 GTV coupe and a 74 Spider.
Ooh. Favorite place you've ever traveled?
That's hard. That one's really hard. I would say, wow.
It's tough, yeah.
Maybe I'll switch that around a little bit. Maybe I won't say my favorite, because I think I've pretty much liked everywhere I've ever traveled.
Okay.
But one of the more unusual places I've ever traveled was a week-long trip down the Middle Fork of the Salmon River in Idaho.
Oh my God, that sounds
and
fantastic.
that was a really unique experience. I mean, I have a lot of other favorite experiences, but that one was truly unique.
I'm just writing that one down. Your best advice to a library owner or somebody considering building a music library today?
My best advice is have a very clear idea of what it is that you're putting together, where you see it fitting within the ways that people use music. It's not enough to say, I'm going to put together a bunch of music. Know what the market is that you want to focus on with that music and be very true to that. Do things at the absolute highest quality you're capable of, and be nice to everybody. And when I say everybody, it's not only the people that you're pitching, to represent your library, but all the other people you work with, your artists, your composers, your engineers. It goes a long way.
Thank you. Edwina, this was really a pleasure. I appreciate you so much, and I appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, and continued success. Tell Adam I said hello, and enjoy the rest of the day.
You too.
I will.
All right.
I will. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.